Well, welcome to our live talk for this Wednesday evening. Glad that you are with us. As you can see, I never know which way to point. I guess that's the way I point. We are doing Fighting Fair. This is part two of our series, and today we're going to start off in Acts 15. I'll give you a little head start on that. So that'll be our part for the part of the scripture we're going to look at. As you also see scrolling down here, say hi and let us know you're watching, especially if you're on Facebook or YouTube. It's very easy, and we'd love to know that you're out there. So we're going to have a good time this evening. So let me just bring the rest of the gang in. Hi, gang.
Hey,
Hey,
how are you all?
We're fine. How are you all?
You're doing well.
Very good.
Full Southern Ohio culture there.
Okay. What is that?
You all.
Y'all?
Yeah.
All right.
we're all
Well, good.
doing good.
Doing
Hi,
well.
Gina. Glad to see you're with us tonight. Appreciate that very much. Hi,
Angie.
Angie. I'm sorry. It's a very tiny letters on the screen I'm looking at. Angie Jordan, thank you, Angie, for joining us. Thank you, Misty, for being here. Appreciate that. Well, we're going to be talking about hola. How you say? I don't know Spanish. Okay,
Hola.
thank you, Pam. Appreciate that. Okay, we're ready to get started tonight. Let me first of all tell you about the study guide that goes along with tonight's session. You can get it. Can you get it on the Facebook link as well, Kayla?
Yep. If you go to our last Facebook post, the link is on there, or you can go to our website, go to news, and you will see it on there.
Actually, you need to go to Life Talk and then click on this series, and you'll see it's the one for session 2. Yeah.
There you go.
Because what happens if you put it on news, the news keeps getting shoved off the page, and so it's gotten shoved off the page. So very good. All right, tonight we're talking about what to do when you can't agree, and this is a fascinating story from the life of Paul and his buddy Barnabas, buddy in ministry. Hi, Patsy. So we're going to do that, but I love this discussion. Let me just maybe reboot here a little bit. What we're trying to do and what we've been doing all these months is a virtual way to us to do a small group discussion. This is not a preaching platform. This is not some master teacher telling us everything we need to know about a passage. We get that on Sundays and other venues, but this is us discussing, and so it's a powerful way to incorporate life and build relationships. And I know it's not the same as us seeing everybody around the table. Let's imagine we're all around the table and you've joined us, and you feel free to join in that conversation with us via your comments or if you have a question. So we're usually what we do is we start off with an icebreaker, just something fun to get the conversation started, kind of get us loosened up. So who has the icebreaker tonight?
I have it.
All right.
All right. So our icebreaker question is, which is better, cat or dogs? Now, I may judge you depending on your answer. I might figure out whether I like you or not. No, I'm just kidding. So there's our question.
Well, we got to
Go ahead.
The whole point of this is we're talking about conflict. So we're asking questions that are going to stir a little bit of conflict.
And sometimes there's conflict between cats and dogs.
There is.
That's
Yes.
true.
So very good. So who wants to get out on the plank and walk toward the ocean first?
Oh, I'll be happy to do that because the answer is very, very simple. Okay. Let me start out with a quote that I'm sure you have heard before. It has been said that in ancient times, cats were worshipped by the Egyptians as gods. And then the follow up for that, and they've never forgotten. Okay. And so now contrast that with my Basset Hound Abner that I grew up on that would slobber over anything that wasn't standing still. Okay. And I mean, I'm a dog guy. Cats only appear to like me when I'm in no mood for them. So they have that ability, that innate ability. He doesn't look like he wants to pet me. I think I'll jump on his lap. So anyway, so I'm a dog dude.
Okay. We're judging
I
you.
would second that. I'm a dog person too. Not that I don't dislike cats. I guess I don't have as much time being with cats because my husband's allergic, my dad's allergic, my brother's allergic. So we kind of I didn't spend a whole lot of time with cats, but I do have a dog, so I better be a dog person.
Okay.
Well, okay, I'll go. Actually, Kayla said that most of our family is allergic to cats, but this may surprise you. I still love cats, and I made them get used to it. They just had to toughen up. I mean, sometimes you just gotta go on. But they're both my favorite. I was kind of joking at the beginning. I absolutely love both. I would take both. I've had both, and I love them both the same.
Okay. I'm gonna be the good politician. Sort of go down the middle. Over the years, we've had growing up and in our children's lives, we've had both cats and dogs as part of the family, so we can relate to both. I'll take this in a theological direction. Okay.
Okay.
Shocking, isn't it? But someone I meant to look this up before we got online today. But someone wrote this work about what cat and dog theology. Okay, and it said one of the things it says. Now think of a dog looks at the human and says, "This human feeds me. This human houses me. This human takes care of me. He must be God." A cat takes that same situation and says, "He feeds me. He houses me. He cares for me. I must be God." So, and there's something to be said about how we look at life.
That's interesting.
Whether we're more cat or dog-like, but that does say something about cat's personality. The old saying is, "You can own a dog, but a cat owns you." That's kind of their personality. So I like them both. So I'm going to get out of this quickly and let's get on to something.
Yeah.
First question. Let's talk about the passage.
Sure. So tonight we're going to be taking a passage from Acts 15, as you've already alluded to. We're going to be starting in verse 36, and we're going to be reading through 41. So Acts 15, 36 through 41. And this is in relation to the disagreement between Paul and Barnabas. So sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us go back and visit the believers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they were doing." Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them. But Paul did not think it was wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left, and commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord, he went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches.
Okay.
So that kind of gets us, those passages get us right into our discussion, which again, we're dealing with conflict. And so we see from this passage, they had a strong disagreement where they could not agree, and they chose to part ways. So let's just go right into the first question, which is, when in a disagreement with someone, are you more likely to stand your ground and not give in, or are you the first to settle things even if you don't win the argument? So this is more of just just on a personal, let's get to figure ourselves out first here.
Well, as far as standing my ground, it kind of depends on for me, it kind of depends on the subject matter. I don't think that all issues are of the same importance. And certainly there are some things, maybe biblical theological concepts, that demand that we stand our ground. But other issues, I don't need to be so dogmatic in relation. So I think I have some more flexibility with some of these. I heard a friend of mine say this, maybe I've said this before, and if I have, please forgive me, but he breaks it into 4 areas. He says some things are worth dying for. Not many, but there are some. Unfortunately, some people make every issue as an issue that they have to die on, but they usually don't have too many friends. So the first category is there are some that are worth dying for. Some things are worth arguing about, but not dying for. Some things are worth talking about, but not arguing about. And there's a whole variety of things that aren't even worth talking about. So,
very good.
I think the answer is certainly there can be issues that we have to be dogmatic about. We have to take our stand. I wonder if maybe we don't exaggerate the number of those things that there actually are. You know, especially if we get kind of emotional, or if I get revved up or a little bit frustrated. I wonder if I don't see things more black and white than they are.
Yeah, I would just jump in with that because I love that four. But you think one thing we need to remind ourselves with Paul and Barnabas and their team, it was life or death. I mean, this was not just going on a nice little trip and we're going to see how everybody is. And I mean, you look at the missionary journeys of Paul. I mean, he was beaten, left for dead, run out of town, threatened, stoned. I mean, it was only the grace of God that he survived through all that. And so, I mean, this was a major issue. I mean, I just want to make sure I get that in there. That was a major issue. And I guess for me, it would be stand your ground or whatever. It kind of depends on sometimes whether my head's in charge or my heart's in charge. Am I going on emotion or am I going on principle? If I'm going on principle, I'm probably going to make the right choice. And there's sometimes you're just like, you know what, as you said, not a hill to die on. Just let it go. Or if there's a principle involved, engage and that sort of thing. But when the emotions get taken over the head, it's hard to kind of then parse that out. Is this category 1, 2, 3, or 4? Or what biblical spirit-led input can be brought to bear in this?
I think for me, no matter what it is, I'm going to be honest. And I'm not saying this is the right answer by any means. No matter what the subject is, if I'm in an argument with someone and if after a couple of points, like if it's something silly or if it's something important, if after a couple of points I know they're not going to behave, I will settle so fast. I will just be like, you know what? All right. You want to say 1 + 1 is 5? You are absolutely right. There's sometimes it's just, for me, I do not enjoy conflict at all. I'm a people pleaser. I just want to keep everybody happy. So I know that's not the right road to take sometimes, but that's how I am.
And I think for me, and I've heard this said before that, you know, when you get older, some of these things won't be as important to you as far as fighting over things. And I kind of have seen that happen. You know, you're talking about a heart issue or a head issue. And I think it's sometimes in maturity too. As you do kind of get older, you decide, you know what, that's really not the hill to die on necessarily, or it's okay if that's what they want to think.
Yeah.
Let me ask the rest of you a question. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer. For things that are not the hill to die on, okay, do you think as we age that we get more tolerant or less tolerant?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, I guess I get more tolerant. Like it doesn't seem to work me up as much. It's like I don't want to have any drama. I don't want to be involved in anything. I mean, you know, now, of course, certain areas, I mean, we do need to stand up for, but if it's something that's not that important hill to die on, I just want to avoid the hill because I ain't got that much time to climb over the hill. So I just want to avoid it.
I think for some of these questions, even this one, we'll have to realize that there is like the spiritual side to it where, yes, we want to be, we want to stand our ground when it comes to things of spiritual nature, when it comes to things about who Jesus is, who obviously we want to be firm in that. But we got to realize most of our arguments and conflicts with people are probably going to be over petty things. They're going to be over day-to-day silly things. We got to keep in mind as we're going through tonight that, yes, there are two sides to this. Where being, later on we're going to talk about being stubborn. Sometimes where it's a good thing, sometimes where it's a bad thing. I just want to get that said right off the bat here. That yes, there are some things you should probably stand your ground on. But again, this is the personal question. And me personally, if you're not getting my point, then all righty. We are going to settle things and still be friends.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
Right,
we can let's move on, and this is going to get us right into like the meat of the passage that we read. So question number 2 is, did Paul and Barnabas do the right thing by splitting up, or should they have found a way to stay together? This question really intrigues me. I'm interested to kind of hear everyone's thoughts on this one. And please give us your comments because we want to know your thoughts on this too.
I wrestled with this one. I really did. And because, I can make an argument for either side. I read a fair amount this week, and some of the commentaries, it was that people's opinion that maybe they made too much of an issue of this. There's no indication that Paul and Barnabas got angry. I mean, they did have a sharp disagreement. Part of that is we weren't there. We don't know how they responded. But if they did not react in anger, if they, they didn't sin in relation to this, then maybe, maybe they did do the right thing. I think one of the things that's interesting, regardless of the position you take, is in that they took 2 different trips, 2 different paths, if you will. They covered, I mean, for lack of a better term, they covered twice as much ground.
Mm-hmm.
And, so it may have been that that wasn't an all bad thing in relation to that. That Barnabas went to Cyprus, and Paul went to Syria and Sicilia, and eventually Europe. So, it's interesting that there was some good that came out of this, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way I read it, and just the way I was thinking, that maybe it was a good thing in a way that they split up, just in the fact that if they would have stayed together, could have caused more harm. Because like you said, it didn't say that they left angry at that point, but what if staying together, they would have continued to rub each other wrong, and then the ministry could have been hurt by that. So, maybe in that regards, maybe them kind of, going their separate ways then, because then later we find out that, Paul does exhort John Mark later.
Yep.
So in my thinking, of course, I was just kind of like bringing it to modern day thinking too, that sometimes it's okay, not to split angry and not to sin in doing it. But if staying together in this is going to cause more harm, more friction, and harm the gospel, I'm seeing them kind of being catty here, maybe, kind of talking about each other a little bit, or, you know what I'm saying? That maybe in that regards, maybe it was better.
Well, let me ask it to you this way then. If it's you and a friend in an argument over something non-spiritual, like just an everyday occurrence, something that you can't agree on, if you can't agree, do you end the friendship basically? Or do you try to find a way to work it out?
Right. Well, and even in this case, the friendship wasn't ended. They just went their separate ways. Again, not necessarily in a negative so much way. They just went on separate ways. But
it also it never really said like. And you're right. They not that they necessarily like ended their friendship, yes, but we all like they never do. At least I wasn't able to find a passage where we see them like coming back together, like where they work together again. Am I wrong in that? I missed it.
Yeah. Well, I think later in Scripture, Paul does call for them to bring John Mark back along.
Mark, yeah. So maybe okay, because that's where I was struggling. Was I couldn't find anything about Barnabas either. That's where I was confused.
Oh, okay.
But to answer your question, I bet you maybe more than one of us have done this. You reach a place where you can't agree on something. And I've heard this said by many people, and I think it's a way to move on is, hey, we can agree to disagree. We may have different opinions about a certain subject matter. And again, obviously it depends on something, or it depends on what the subject is. But if it's, the color that we're going to paint the room or something like that, we can just agree to disagree, and that's okay.
Hey, Jess, you're muted.
That's probably why you're not hearing me.
Could be.
But you know, a couple things. It says a sharp contention.
Yep, it does.
The fact that Luke puts that in there, I think it was intense. And also, we have this little reference to, and this is Colossians 4:10. He says, Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, greet you, and Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, about whom you received instruction, that comes to you, welcome him. So there was a little bit of blood involved in this as well. So Barnabas and Mark were relatives. And by the way, just to flesh this out, Barnabas basically at this point, except for a few references in the epistles, leaves the narrative. Okay, of what they, you know, their missionary journey and all that. But Mark is the writer of the Gospel of Mark. Okay, so it's John Mark. So I mean, he was certainly used of God and so forth. He also shows up back in the Gospels as well. Let's take a look at what Pam has to say. Ephesians 4:3 pops into mind though. Striving to keep the unity in the Spirit. I don't know they have the conclusion, but I don't know how hard they fought for unity. Good question.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the driving force for them, and should be for us as well, is what is best for the kingdom, what is best for the Lord's work. And maybe they just reach the conclusion, you know, this is just not going to, if we're going to carry this with us, it's going to be bad. So let's divide and conquer. Let's just blessings and you know, they went on. And obviously, Paul's let's not carry this forever. Over in 2 Timothy, and Lisa was alluding to this, 2 Timothy chapter 4, which is this is the last book we believe Paul wrote before he was martyred, killed. And he says, "Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he's useful to me for ministry." So whatever problem he had with Mark back in here in Acts 15, it was certainly gone toward the end of his life. He didn't just cut him off and forever. He brought him back in. I know that's not exactly you know, informing us much on the question, but it is some biblical data points that help us get some context to that.
Sure.
I just think this is like I said, this was such an interesting question to me because again, if you ask it in the other, in reference to a more modern day conflict, you know, like especially right now, I feel like there's a lot of conflict in political parties, and let's be honest, we know that has been such a sore subject for people lately, and you know, a lot of times it's almost either you're out for blood or friendship's over. You know, if you can't agree on a subject like that. So I was very interested to find out your thoughts on if splitting up was the right thing to do. But we can move on. Question 3, which is we know that being stubborn or hard-headed against God is a sin, as you see in 1 Samuel 15:23. But is it also a sin when in conflict with others? So again, whenever it's not necessarily spiritual conflict, it's being, I guess the real question is being stubborn a sin?
It's all about the context. And let me just read the verse that's we're alluded to here so we get it in the record. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry, because you have rejected the word of the Lord, who's also rejected you from being king. And obviously, this is Samuel speaking about Saul. He did not. He went against King Agag in this story and did not do what he was supposed to do. And then he tries to cover it up, and then he tries to put a spin of spirituality on it. I did this for you, God, and all that. So it was a stubbornness against God. And so I guess Gina says depends on what it's about in her comment. And if you'll bring that comment up there, Lisa.
Oh, sorry. I was reading my notes.
Okay, it's okay. But I mean that's really is true. I mean, it might be stubborn and might be perceived as stubborn if I'm not going to give in to something that I have principles against, and it wouldn't be right for me or best for me. But stubbornness against what God wants us to do, or stubbornness against reasonableness. Generally, stubbornness is a negative. Let me just say it that way.
Yeah,
it's definitely viewed as more of a negative. You know, anytime I hear that word, instantly I've got negative thoughts about whatever it is. And yes, I agree. It is, you know, dependent on what it's about. But playing a little bit of like devil's advocate here, if God's all about, we're supposed to love and, put others' interests above our own, that just makes it seem like being stubborn for any reason and not, it could be a sin. But again, this is just me playing devil's advocate and just trying to get all the questions answered here.
Well, here, Gina has a good comment, because actually in this context, she was saying that I was stubborn for God, and it led the other person to dig in to prove me wrong, and actually led them to a realization of Christ. So it all is in the context of the word. I mean, lots of times when you hear the word stubborn, it can appear, it sounds negative. In this point, she's saying that her stubbornness for God, led this person to dig in to prove her wrong, because probably they were stubborn too, but then ended up coming into a realization of Christ.
Yeah, force the person to go and dig out. Okay, dig into the facts. What do we believe in here, and that sort of thing. Yeah. Go ahead, Joe. Go, please.
I think there's also, in all of the mix, and you all can help me sort this out, I also think there's a time factor that's involved with stubbornness. I think that I've known or heard of people, say couples, that are both stubborn and they don't talk for days, or they're cold to each other for long periods of time. And I don't think God honors that. There's the verse about not letting the sun go down on your anger. So I think in all of this, in relation to stubborn, there's a difference for being stubborn for 5 minutes and a difference between being stubborn for 5 days. Those are different things. So I think the time element enters into that to some degree.
Patsy reminds us we must forgive 70 times 7, Jesus said, and so that is it's important for us to understand that the person is important.
Yeah,
there's no definition of tact, which I like. It says tact is the art of making a point without making an enemy. And you can stand principled and still find a way. We want to make sure that in our arguments we don't devalue the person. We may disagree with their conclusion, but we can do that in a civil, calm way. And I guess I just want to believe the best about Paul and Barnabas. I think they had a meeting of the minds and presented their evidence and their thoughts and their and so forth. But I think they moved ahead.
Yeah. And going back to what Kayla said, back to number 2, when she kind of pulled it into modern day and she's talking about, how even sometimes politics or whatever, in ways like that, I think that we should always find a way to stay together. There's always got to be, because no matter what our politics are, our common ground is still Jesus. And even if you move past that, your common ground should be to love, you're human, to love other humans and to be kind. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to back that up just a little bit, that, that kind of follows suit with what we were saying too.
Yeah. And a person, let me just take this direction. Just because a person is wrong does not give me the right to hate them.
Exactly. Good point.
Even though I might be repulsed by what they are espousing. Okay. And again, it's this reflection back on what Patsy said about forgive us. Jesus said we forgive because how much are you forgiven? And sometimes it's people's lostness that leads them to be the way they are, and sometimes it's maturity. And yes, very good. Gina says yes, love first. And if I can just add to that, love first, love always, love last. Love is what drives us as believers. That's what makes us stand out in this world.
And that's totally the example that Jesus gave. If we just follow Jesus in that, lots of things that people were saying around him, he knew was wrong. It was absolutely wrong, but he could always love them.
Yep.
Good point.
I think it's important to know, we're always going to have people that rub us the wrong way. There's always going to be someone in our life that we're never going to be best friends with. We're always going to have that because, we're human, we're imperfect. We've all got different personalities, different ways we think things through. So in that regards, maybe it is best you just avoid, but if you can't, if there's just no way you can avoid this person, it's always got to be that just like Gina said, that love first. But let's go on to our last question, which is, what does God call us to do when we cannot seem to find a solution to a conflict with someone else? So basically, to wrap up this whole discussion, what does God call us to do then in these situations where, and again, I'm not even necessarily talking about a spiritual debate, day to day, every day, conflict with another person. What do you do when you can't agree?
Someone go first. I'm looking something up.
All right, Ed here. I think lots of times people fall into the fight or flight category, you know, and so and I think many of us are inclined to be one or the other. Sometimes facing conflict head on is the last thing we want to do. We'd rather bury our head in the sand or avoid the person who caused us the pain and just try to pretend that the offense never happened. And maybe we even think, maybe we take that to the extreme where we think by avoiding the conflict or the person entirely, we convince ourselves that we're doing so to maintain peace. And the problem with that, it really never resolves the issue. So I think one thing, and I think there's a biblical basis for this. I believe that God calls us to initiate the process of reconciliation. Okay, let me challenge you with a couple verses. Matthew 18:15. Matthew 18:15. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. So, you know, if you think of something, and there's the converse of that is also found in Matthew. You know, if you're either the offender or the offendee, and you think about it, you take the initiative to go work on reconciliation. That's your job. Romans 14:19 has a verse that kind of parallels that. So then let us pursue what makes for peace and for mutual understanding. So I think as Christians, we have a responsibility to initiate resolution. I think that's one of our responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
I love this comment. Sorry, I was just gonna really quickly. I love this comment from Andrea because this is how I feel. When I cannot find a resolution, I often have to love that person in Christ from a distance. And that's okay. I think sometimes, you know, to some people that can seem like such a negative, like bad thing. But just like with Paul and Barnabas, sometimes it is, you know what, I'm going to love you, but from a distance, just to keep the peace.
Very good. Thank you. I'm going to just throw into the mix a verse from Ephesians 4:15, because it really just summarizes. We've been talking about this. But speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things into Him who is the head, Christ. Again, He's the point. That's the ultimate principle we operate on, and our actions speak the truth in love. Those things have to both be in play. With one without the other, we're in trouble.
Yeah, I think so many times the truth gets spoken, but it gets spoken harshly. It gets spoken judgmentally, and it's all in the presentation. You know, you can calm so many arguments, so many situations just with, you know, the reflection in your voice. That's why, you know, in some ways, Facebook and text and other things, they can be so hurtful because you can't hear a tone in a text or in Facebook, or you can hear a tone, but it's the, you know, so it's all in love, how you speak it in love. I mean, definitely speak the truth. Don't run away from speaking truth, but do it in love. I love that verse.
Is there a way? Is there a way to improve the tone of nonverbal communicate? Not nonverbal communication, non-spoken communication.
You use a lot of emojis.
You put a little smiley, yeah, or you know, LOL. I meant that funny, not serious, but it's sometimes it's sometimes just best to pick up the phone and talk to somebody.
I agree.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, and I need to do it now, and just push, you know, the button and talk.
Yeah.
So
I love Kara's comment. Truth without love is mean. Love without truth is weak. Truth and love are powerful.
Well
Love
said.
She's
that.
got the emoji. See? The
In the
emoji
heart,
is good.
yeah, she's got it. She'd see that
Yes.
we got the tone from the emojis. Okay, that answers my
Exactly.
question. Not totally, but it.
Back to what Lisa
Thank you,
was
Kara.
saying. The whole point of like your tone, and yeah, if you're going to deliver something harshly, even if it is the truth, I can guarantee you that while I may settle just to close the argument, I don't care if you're right. I'm never going to agree because of the way you said something to me. I think that's probably the same thing with a lot of people. If you're going to yell at something, if you're going to yell the truth at me, I'm done. You're never going to be right. Gina, she has a comment here that she wrote. It says, "Speak the truth in love. Let God's love shine through you. Be an example of the person you wish they could be. The light in you is a game changer." That's a game changer. I love that. That's a good illustration.
Yeah. We've been using the word a lot in children's ministry. When the kids are leaving, I'm telling them to go out and be a world changer. Because it's their life, their light, the way they shine, the way they react. That's how they're going to change the world.
Going back to what Jess said, what can we do practically if we're dealing with something like this? I think we've talked about this before, not necessarily tonight. If you've got a situation with another person that you believe has the real possibility of being a sensitive subject, I think there's always an advantage, if at all possible, to go see that person in person. Don't rely on text or emails or even emojis. They're good.
Yeah.
But if you've got a chance to talk to someone about an issue in person, assuming that you can control your own emotions, okay, I think there's almost always an advantage in doing it.
Well, a real smile is better than a smile emoji anytime.
You bet.
Yeah. All right, let's get to our bottom line, which is our summary statement. Then we're going to be some practical steps, next steps we call them. But don't allow your own stubbornness to keep you from following what God has called us to do, which is to love others and put their interest above your own. Philippians 2:3-4. Let me just read those verses. This again, this is game changer stuff here. All right. So 2, 3, and 4. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. It's that opposite of self-focus. It's others focus. So good bottom line.
Yeah. Gina says in there, I think there was a small group that studied a book, Bad Blood, and she was pointing out that it says, in as much as you can, make the effort to right the conflict.
Yes, absolutely.
That was a great small group study too. I know they've done that several times, and I know it's been very positive for people.
Yeah. There's a group I was in that went through that study too. It is really powerful. Okay, let's get to the next steps if we can. We were looking at Philippians. Sorry, we're playing.
I'm going to pull it up right now.
Yeah, what you don't know is Lisa and I are trampling on each other with the controls here. Sorry about that. All right, read Philippians 2:3, which we were just reading a moment ago, and keep the verse in mind as you deal with future conflicts. And it's a good reminder just to take some of Scripture and get it embedded into our head and in our heart. And the Holy Spirit has that material ready for us. So great suggestion. And then find things in your life that you would consider yourself. Find things in your life that you would consider yourself stubborn or hard-headed about, and give them over to the Lord. He can begin softening your heart in those areas. And this is just a powerful thing. Find those areas of weakness, admit them. That's part of that lowliness of mind that he talks about there in Philippians chapter 2. And of course, in that passage, the lowliness is illustrated by the humility of Christ and going to the cross. Okay, it's pretty powerful stuff. But let's let that soften your heart through those areas. You else want to talk about that next step? Any additions there?
Oh, sorry, to the one we just had up. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah.
It's
yeah. Go ahead,
say that
Jim.
again.
No, you go ahead.
We're all still walking on each other. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a convicting thing. But if I'm really honest with myself, it doesn't take all that long for me to flush out the ones some of the areas that I'm weak in. And there's probably other ones. Maybe maybe the parallel request from God is identify things in my heart that I don't even recognize that I'm struggling with. And, but it's a convicting thought, but I think it's a very good one.
Yeah.
It's always important, again, to have this information before going into a conflict, because once you get into that conflict, if you don't already have this in your mind, if you don't already have these verses, locked and loaded and ready to go, that's whenever sin can kind of creep in. That's, how we can have the wrong answer to solving our conflicts. So that's why it is important just to identify those areas the best you can that you struggle with, you're going to be stubborn about, you've got issues with, and begin just giving those over to the Lord. But I also love the last next step, which is work on dealing with conflict by having an open mind and being willing to listen and understand someone else's point of view. And again, these don't always have to go for our spiritual debates or our spiritual conflicts we may have with someone. But even if you're in a debate, or if you're in a conflict with someone of a different belief, you never want to go in, like we've been talking about, with that fist, and you're just yelling the truth at them. It's important to take in what they believe, understand where they're coming from, how they grew up, because you're coming from two different spots, two different areas of life, two different walks of life, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So even though you may be right, you still got to have that open mind.
Yeah. I'm reminded of the quote that we've heard before many times: in essentials, unity; in non-essentials, liberty; and in all things, charity; and all things, love. I'm done.
That's okay. We're not going to have any conflict over that. We're just going to, that's fine. Take a long, Gina says, take a long look in the mirror. That long look in the mirror is needed in order to grow in the Lord. That is so true. And this work on notice I love these two, actually all three of these next steps. Okay. Get the scripture, find in your things that you have areas of, turn those over to the Lord. That's that depending and trusting, and then work on dealing it. That's the trying and doing. Okay. So it's always a both and. We talked about that in our Ephesians study. And then to listen, understand, to really listen to that person, engage with them, and try to understand their point of view. May not agree with it, but try to understand and value that person. Sometimes, even if we do not agree with the person, the fact that you really listen makes a difference.
Yep, absolutely.
And good news is we got our whole life to work on this, because we never will attain, we'll never come to the point where we can be like, oh, we've got this mastered. This is something that we have to work on from the time we're in the sandbox, and we learn that you just have to get along and realize that toy's not going to be shared until even later on in life, that this is always something that we can be working on.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, gang. Appreciate your joining in, and we want to encourage you that are watching that feel free to share this video. It's going to stay online, so I'm going where it's, even though we're streaming it live as we're doing this, it's going to stay there. And hopefully this whole series that we're into on fighting fair, this is part 2, and we'll look at it again the subject next week. So thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Joe.
All right.
No problem. We'll see you guys next week.
Have a great evening.
All right, we look forward to seeing you Sunday. Sunday is Father's Day. We're going to have a special day planned, special message, special things throughout. So looking forward to that. And it looks like the governor is going to lift some of the social media, social distancing. Sometimes social media is social distancing, social distancing things. And we're going to be we're getting back to normal. So we're really looking forward to having everybody out for worship on this Lord's Day. So until then, we'll see you. And keep making progress as we seek to grow in the Lord. So, good night, everybody.